Good morning, everybody. At least good morning to those of you who are joining us from on the West Coast. For those of you who are on the East Coast, good afternoon. Today we continue our series in being safe in an unsafe world by looking at some of the fabrics that are used in the clothes we wear, the furniture that we sit in, the bedding that we sleep in. We have tremendous exposure to all of these different items, and that's going to be the focus of today's talk. I am Bob Tygenhof. I'm the director of the Center for Active Lifestyle Medicine at the Integrative Medical Group in Irvine, California. We will be continuing this series on Monday night at 6 o'clock when we're going to be looking at HEPA filters. And HEPA filters are common in air purification systems and vacuum cleaners, things like that. People who have allergies are often advised to use HEPA filters and HEPA vacuum cleaners. We're going to take a look at that use and why you might want to consider using a HEPA vacuum cleaner for your house, even if you don't suffer from allergies and asthma. Since they are designed to remove from the air and from the environment microparticles that have a very profound effect on human health. So that'll be Monday night at 6 o'clock. I hope you'll join me then. Today, as I said, we're going to be speaking mostly about the fabrics that we surround ourselves with and live with on an everyday basis. Again, they're in the clothes that we wear. They're on the furniture that we sit in, and they're in the bedding fabrics that we sleep all night in. We prize a number of qualities from these fabrics, and we didn't always have them. What we really like to see today are fabrics that are stain resistant. We like fabrics, particularly in clothing, that are wrinkle resistant. That's a nice quality. And then waterproof, lots and lots of jackets, things like that. We want to be able to go outside in the rain when we have to and not get soaked. But we want also those clothing to be breathable. So we have gotten away from a lot of the plastic types of clothing that we wore a number of years ago. We know it's almost impossible to find rubber galoshes, things like that anymore. They've been replaced by a whole set of new fabrics and new materials that have these qualities in them. And they seem to be miracles of modern technology. They are ballyhooed by the manufacturers, not only that produce them, but by the clothing manufacturers who incorporate these fabrics into the materials and the clothing that they manufacture. What is the problem really in terms of using any of these clothes that have these wonderful properties about them? If the price to pay is very small, then maybe that's just what we accept as part of normal daily living in the 21st century. Well, unfortunately, the chemicals that are used have been associated with, through numerous studies with kidney and testicular cancer, high cholesterol, abnormal thyroid hormone levels, pregnancy-induced hypertension, preeclampsia, obesity, and low birth weight. These are not trivial consequences. These are very serious. How we actually get exposed to these chemicals is not really well understood at this point. It's not that when we put them on our bodies, we simply absorb these chemicals into our bodies through the skin. That doesn't necessarily seem to be the primary way that they get into us. And the epidemiological studies that have been done indicate that virtually all Americans carry these chemicals, and these are a class of chemicals called the perfluorochemicals. We all virtually carry them in our bloodstream today, varying degrees. what we know is that people who live in the areas surrounding the manufacturing plants of these types of chemicals have very high levels. And so consequently, we think that a lot of the exposure comes from chemical companies simply dumping their excess waste material into the rivers that then feed the water supplies of communities downstream. DuPont was fined $116 million a couple of years ago, I believe it was in 2011, for contaminating very, very large areas in West Virginia. They also vent the chemicals out the tops of the factories. Those go into the surrounding areas, blanket the ground. Children play on that ground, and they consequently absorb these chemicals as well. One of the problems that we have with these chemicals is that it appears that they have virtually no half-life, meaning they simply do not degrade. They don't dissociate into their elemental parts. They remain as perfluorochemicals for years and years and years and years and years. The body, if we get them into our bodies, we will detoxify and eliminate them, although we have a very hard time doing it. And so they do stick around for longer periods of time than you would like. But the problem is that we are so constantly exposed to them that even if we're eliminating them, we continue to bring more of them in, so we maintain a relatively high level of exposure internally to these chemicals. Where are they found? So obviously the purpose of this talk and on the entire series is not only to identify the danger, but to give you the knowledge to understand where it's coming from, to know what brands, what products carry these sorts of things, and then what kind of action you can take. The coatings that contain the perfluorochemicals are fabrics like Gore-Tex, very, very commonly used, Polartec, which is a material used in a lot of fleece products, Stainmaster, which if you've purchased carpet at any time in probably the last 20 or 30 years, that's typically given as an option. And who doesn't want their carpets to stay clean and great looking the entire time? So lots and lots of carpets have Stainmaster on them. And Scotchgard, which is also used commonly in a lot of clothing to make it stain resistant and waterproof. I know when I was growing up, they sold Scotchgard in spray bottles, and you could buy regular clothes that were simply made of cotton, and you could spray them with Scotchgard and turn them into stain resistant, water resistant garments. Probably a really, really bad idea, but it seemed at the time nobody understood the dangers, and so people did it all the time. What are the brands that use these kinds of fabrics and chemicals? Well, you can get jackets made by North Face, made by Patagonia, Adidas, and Columbia, all containing these Gore-Tex and Polartec fabrics. When it comes to swimwear, and this comes from a study done by Greenpeace when they went out, purchased these clothing and analyzed them, Disney and Burberry swimwear contain these chemicals, and also shoes, running shoes primarily, but Nike and Puma were identified in the study as well as having these chemicals used in them. Part of the problem with these chemicals, and the reason that they leach out and create problems, is that they're typically manufactured as long chain polymers. So they're very, very long chains of material. They're wound into the fabrics as they're created in the factories, and in that configuration, they are fairly stable. The problem with it is that no manufacturing process is 100%. So while most of the perfluorochemicals that are put into these fabrics are in fact long chain polymers, there is a percentage that simply make their way into the fabric as very, very short chain polymers, or as the individual molecules, which are known as monomers. Those very small particles easily leach out of the materials, and certainly in the case of Stainmaster and some of the carpet materials that are used, they end up falling into the bottom of the carpet. There they sit until children typically play on the floor in the carpets, and they breathe these very, very small molecules into their bodies. And so small children typically will have concentrations of these chemicals higher than adults will. In addition, it's a little bit far afield from fabrics today, but these same perfluorochemicals are used in things like the new Apple Sport Watch wristband. That's made of PFCs. Microwavable popcorn, what gives the aluminum foil as it expands and blows up, it has a very slick surface feel to it, and that's created through the use of perfluorochemicals. Perfluorochemicals are more prone to leach and to get into food products when they're heated. So doing microwavable popcorn is probably not a really good idea. And one more way of protecting yourself from these things is to recognize the fact that Oral-B Glide floss is made entirely of PFC chemicals. So any of it that rubs off on your teeth, any small strands, small particles that are left in your mouth after you finish, they're going to be swallowed and incorporated, absorbed into your body. So I know personally I've gotten rid of all of my Oral-B floss. I loved it. It was great, but it's also probably not the best idea in the world to be using perfluorochemicals in your mouth. So I've gotten rid of that. Now, what's the action that you take in all of these things? Clearly, for most people, simply going through their wardrobe and throwing away tons and tons of clothing is not a practical solution. So what we typically recommend at our practice is not necessarily that you eliminate all of the clothing and materials and the furniture that you have, which often contains these same stain-resistant and water-proofing chemicals. But it's more a case of being aware of what they are and knowing that when you have to replace those garments, when you have to replace your furniture, don't fall into the almost automatic purchasing behavior of simply buying more of them. Look for product that doesn't have these chemicals in them. Most of these things are available in retail. Virtually all of them are available online. So it's not terribly difficult to find purer alternatives that don't carry the same potential for danger that perhaps some of these do. That's our recommendation. That's certainly what we do in my household. It's what I would recommend that you do in yours. It's a great way of staying safe in an unsafe world. Hopefully, I'll see you on Monday night at 6 o'clock, again, when we'll talk about HEPA filters and how you can protect yourself and your family from the very, very dangerous particulate matter and fine particulate matter that has become pervasive throughout our environment and the world today. So again, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again. In the meantime, do everything you can to stay safe in an unsafe world.